Hi, I am Kimmy with On William Street, and today we are talking about quilting. Now I'm going to walk you through how I just determined the quilting plan and created the quilting plan for our Windswept quilt pattern to help give you ideas and a path you can follow when you're planning your next quilt. I know that sometimes when quilting a quilt, the hardest part is coming up with the quilting plan and what to put on it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk you through the different steps and the process I used to come up with the quilting plan for our Windswept quilt pattern. This is available in our Etsy shop if you like the pattern and want to make one of your own. And in the meantime, I'm going to show you the different techniques and the different concepts and principles that I used to determine how to quilt and where to quilt it. So the first thing I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about really quick is thread color. A lot of people aren't really sure kind of what thread colors to use and how it's going to look and how it's going to blend. If I have a white background, I'm always going to use white in the background unless I'm picking like a color for a specific design purpose. I also really don't like changing thread colors all that much. I don't mind the thread, you being able to see the thread. So in this quilt, you can see even in these darker solids, I have used white on the entire thing. If I'd wanted it to blend, I definitely could have gone with a medium or a darker purple in these sections and it would have blended more. So keep that in mind. If you don't want the quilting to stand out quite as much, or maybe you're newer, or you just don't like the quilting to be as prominent, you can definitely use a color that's going to blend. And I would have used probably a different color for each of the different flowers. See the purple, the red, and the orange. I would have picked, a purple to go on the purple, a red on the red, and an orange on the orange if I'd wanted them to blend. But it doesn't bother me, so I just went ahead and did white. But it's really just going to be personal preference and kind of what you're going for. So with this quilt, it's got these kind of sides, and I was trying to decide how did I want to approach that. Did I want it to be one continual piece? Did I want them to be separate? And I decided that I was going to go ahead and do those as two as one kind of continual piece, and I was going to use it to break it down because I have these weird negative space areas that kind of come in on the flower, and by simply framing those flowers, now I've eliminated those weird negative space issues, and it's going to make it a lot easier for me to decide what to quilt and how to quilt it. And that's one of the first things I'm always going to do when designing a quilting plan. I'm going to break down the space. I'm going to create smaller sections that I'm focused on, and it makes it much less overwhelming to me. So now that I had these kind of broken down, I really wanted to echo. This is definitely these flowers are very large. They're about 46 inches from point to point. So I wanted to really kind of keep the focus there and to draw everything and all the attention to those big central elements. And so I decided to go ahead and just echo out. But I didn't want just straight lines, so I kind of echoed, bigger spaces and left some open. And then in some of them, I went ahead and did back and forth lines, and this is one of my favorite fillers. It really works to make everything around it stand out. But I left some open and I put it in some. And that's just the motif that I executed. And as you can see, it it literally points to the flowers. And line can be a fantastic way to really point to and make different elements stand out by using those lines in a way that they help outline and point to and draw your eye to those different elements that you want to be the main focus. So that was what I did in those negative space areas on the outside. Then all of my attention was turned to the flowers themselves. Now that I'm looking at the flowers, I still had kind of these weird shapes in here, and I wasn't really quite sure how to deal with that until I realized that if I simply echoed the flower around, now those shapes really pretty much disappeared. And so what I decided to do on all of them was to just go ahead and pull off and I left it about an inch, 3/4 of an inch to an inch, and I just echoed around all the flowers, and that gave me now a shape in here to deal with as opposed to this whole border sashing thing I had going on. But I didn't really want that shape to be like a super standout thing. I definitely wanted it to be more of a background, so I chose to go ahead and just fill it in with the pebbles, and that makes it definitely more of a kind of a background, but it provides just an insane amount of texture and fun to those sections. And you can see here how well it works in you know, the shape in between all the petals and becomes this background feature here. Also, repetition in quilt design is fantastic. It kind of helps to tie things together. So I went ahead and repeated the pebbles in the center here. And the reason that I put it in the center, I will be honest with you, I love pebbles. I love the look that they give, but they take forever to quilt. By putting it here in the center, it separated the two spaces out, so they went on top of each other, but it kept it in one of the smaller areas. So I was able to take advantage of the, you know, the texture elements that they add, but on a smaller scale, so it didn't take as long to kind of finish the quilt. So now we've got pebbles out here. Throw a few in here really quick. And we've got pebbles inside all of the yellow sections. And I did just repeat everything. I didn't worry about doing the petals different. I went ahead and kept things pretty simple and stayed the same on each of the different petals. Now we have this white section, and by the time I got everything kind of going, I had a lot going on and I wanted to kind of simplify a little bit. I didn't really feel like I needed an area for your eye to rest. So on this white area, I went ahead and just did some straight lines and I rayed them out from the inside. And what that is, like I said, it gives your eye a place to rest, to add some contrast in the density of the quilt, so that it gives parts that are going to stand out and be a little bit more than others. So that's what I did in the white. And then I had this big section here. There was probably the biggest section of the quilt that I was filling, so I knew it needed to be something that I really liked, a design that I really liked, something that would be fairly simple, not super time intensive to do. I did have some deadlines for this quilt. I kind of needed to get it done. We had, you know, photos coming up and a pattern release, so I didn't want it to be a 2-month-long process. But I really love swirls, so I went ahead and put swirls in the outer petals. You can't see it really well with the pencil, but you can see it here on the quilt. And I went ahead and filled those in with swirls. That also was really nice because it really contrasted these straight lines here with the straight lines and then the straight lines on the outside edges. This really gave it a nice contrast. And then more contrast, I went ahead and because these were printed fabrics, I knew that whatever design I put in there was going to not show up as well or was going to compete with the print of the petal. And so that's why I went ahead and just did a cross hatching and just did a simple simple grid all the way across and left it like that. So we've got the different angles. These are going at an angle. These are going the opposite direction. We've got the curves here. And just all of them really kind of work together to provide a lot of visual interest. So to quilt this, I just went ahead and started echoing the shape along the line along the edge of the petal. And then from there, you can use your rulers or your foot to go at a 90-degree angle the opposite direction. So that's going to be a really easy way to place that out. I did have a little bit of hopping around here, but really not much. Because I was able to use the lines around these, I went ahead and quilted around each of those shapes. I did leave these empty. I didn't worry about quilting in that. They're only about 1.5 inches, so I can get away with not putting anything in them. But then I did throw a little X in the middle here to hold everything down. And by using these shapes to quilt around the outside, I was able to pretty much get everywhere I needed to go without having to stop and break thread and start over again. So now that I was done with the inside of the quilt, I had the borders left to deal with. And because I had left these green sections open, I decided to go ahead and leave the green sections on the borders open as well, and I didn't worry about quilting them. But then in this one, I went ahead and did a piano key. And the reason I did a piano key is because a lot of stuff is happening on here in the middle. And I could have easily, you know, extended this out, echoed some shapes in here, but I really wanted the focus to remain on the flowers themselves. Just like I talked about with the side sections and the lines pointing directly into it, I wanted all that focus to be here on the flowers. So I didn't want to draw a whole lot of craziness happening in the border so that you weren't competing for attention of what I felt was the most important element. So that's why I went ahead and just did the piano keys. And I just did 2 simple lines and then a space. Piano keys are a lot of fun. You can do, you know, 3 lines, you can do 4 lines, you can vary the spaces, you can do, you know, wider, skinnier. So there's really a lot of variety you can do with the same type of design, but to really change it up and add a lot of different elements there. So that's what I went ahead and put in the border, and it's something just to keep it simple so that the focus stayed on the flowers and didn't detract from that main central element. When creating a quilting plan, really just kind of be willing to try new things, be willing to play with it. I always go ahead and draw it out on the paper first, and that's going to allow me to see exactly how, you know, those elements are going to kind of play together. The scale is probably not going to be exactly perfect because it's obviously a much smaller section, but it gives you a chance to see how those two designs or multiple designs are going to work together. So I definitely like to put it down on paper first. I've found I do a lot less unpicking when I put it down on paper over just going straight to the quilt. And it doesn't necessarily even need to be complicated. If you're looking at this quilting plan, it's really only got, you know, a few different elements that I'm mixing together. So go ahead, don't feel scared. You know, don't worry about maybe using some repetition, reusing some of the designs in different areas. You can use the same design and just mix up the scale, make, you know, one section bigger, one section a little bit smaller. So you can play with it around like that too. Decide what you want to be the main focus of the quilt, and then use lines and use other elements to point to that. So those are some ways that you can definitely look at a quilt and start to break it down and figure out how you want to approach the quilting design and how you want to finish that project. So if you have any questions, you know, on quilting, on coming up with a quilting plan, or any specific issues that you're having, definitely reach out to us. We would love to, you know, help you out, answer any questions you have, make future videos on specific hang-ups that you're having in the process. And don't forget to subscribe to our videos. We do videos every week, all throughout on the entire quilting process. So definitely go ahead and subscribe, like the video if you liked what you saw. Again, you can get the Windswept quilting plan in our Etsy shop. Not the quilting plan, the Windswept quilt pattern to make your own quilt in our Etsy shop. And we are super excited. I mean, right now we're posting this video right before Christmas, so we want to take a chance to say, you know, happy holidays to everyone that's out there. If you're celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas. If you're celebrating, you know, a different holiday, please enjoy the time off, and, you know, hopefully you're with some family and friends. Take a little extra time for quilting. We won't tell anybody. And we will see you after the new year. So we hope that you have a fantastic break, and we will see you next time. Bye.